morning, everyone. And thank you, Andy. My name's Antia. I actually have two roles. One is the Upper Murrumbidgee Demonstration Reach, which is a native fish project working on the Murrumbidgee River, and I coordinate the Cooma Region Water Watch program, which monitors river health. I actually grew up along the banks of the Murrumbidgee River, so it is a place that I really love. And I'm just so fortunate to be able to work in this space to try to improve the health of the river. And I just thought that at this forum, with a lot of people coming together who also care about the river, I thought that I would actually acknowledge a whole range of different partners that I've been working with, and also funders that work to look after the Murrumbidgee River and also invest in its health. A little caveat on that is we work on the Murrumbidgee River between Tantangra Dam and Burrinjuck Dam, and so that's why I'm missing a few logos such as national parks and things like that who are also involved. So if I've left, and I haven't put Snowy Hydro's logo on there, but just wanted to recognise that all of us, including Parks and Snowy Hydro, are actually working towards the Murrumbidgee River and better outcomes. Another graph, another graph of Australia and the basin. I just thought that I would just start with a little bit of background. We are the headwaters of the Upper Murrumbidgee River. We are the very top of the southern part of the Murray-Darling Basin. And apart from all the partners that I put up there, I also want to acknowledge that we work with landholders along on the reach who are really important partners, but also want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the Upper Murrumbidgee who've always been connected to the river, continue to be connected to the river, and have cared for it for thousands of years. And in the Upper Murrumbidgee, we've got Ngunnawal, Ngarigo, Ngambri, Walgaloo, and I put Wiradjuri up because the very upper reaches, the headwaters, are actually shared responsibility between a number of adjoining nations. One of the reasons that we are unique ecologically in the Upper Murrumbidgee is that our river is characteristic of an upland stream. So what that means ecologically, a healthy upland stream has crystal clear waters. It has low turbidity, it has low nutrients, it has low bacteria and low dissolved salts. So you see a crystal clear water free of silt and bacteria. Upland streams are typically fringed by dense riparian vegetation which supplies all the carbon inputs and drives the food webs and the productivity of that river to help clean it, to keep it clean. That riparian vegetation also stabilises the banks and provides filter for runoff that comes into the river. And these upland catchments, by the nature of our geography, also have characteristically good ground cover. Our region is famous for its native temperate grasslands, which have protected the ground cover. Our catchment incorporates the Southern Alps and the winter snow that typically provided large water source and that caught rain in the summertime. And that influenced that flow regime that Dan showed us pre-dam, where we typically had large snow melts that would provide a rushing gush of water that would actually clean the river and scour the bottom of the river out. And then as the flows reduced and they became warmer in summer, that would actually provide temperature cues for spawning of our native fish that live in the river. Today it's a little bit different. There's a lot more going on in our catchment. We are a regulated stream. At the very top of our river, we have Tantangra Dam, and at the bottom end of the catchment, we have Burrinjuck Dam. That has influenced the flow regimes, but there's also an increasing range of demands and pressures. There's been a lot of change in land use, and that's impacted on the health of our river. But in the Upper Murrumbidgee River, we're really lucky because we have got these fantastic native fish species. Some of them are protected because they are listed as threatened. So that means that numbers are greatly reduced from pre-European times, but they are there in our catchment. So we have, specifically, we have a nationally significant or one of the best populations of Macquarie perch in the river upstream of Cooma. And we also have a nationally significant population of Murray cod, an unstocked natural population that's actually, the science is telling us, is actually increasing. And that population is centred around Canberra, but we're finding Murray cod upstream now up to Breadbow. And we have a range of other species, the iconic platypus, the ricali and the water rat. Unfortunately, due to changes in the catchment, the silver perch used to be in our catchment but is now functionally extinct. But our catchment is also unique for another reason in that the fish assemblages and also some of the other animal and plant assemblages that you see are characterised both that upland ecology and then the lowland ecology that you would see on the Murrumbidgee River down at Wagga. And the sort of change between these is the top end of the ACT border, and one of the really best examples of that is the riparian vegetation on the left. The upper Murrumbidgee around Cooma we've got small remnants of ribbon gum floodplain woodlands, and then down in the ACT everyone would know the lovely river she oaks which shade the river. So we really have unique aquatic species. And even though that the science tells us that the river of the health is in decline and that some of our population numbers are much lower than pre-European numbers, we have got these small yet resilient native fish populations and other species, and that's why the environmental of the values of the upper Murrumbidgee are really worth protecting. We're seeing lots going on in the Murray-Darling Basin at the moment, and they're luckily problems we're not having to deal with environmentally. And so, we really need to focus on the upper Murrumbidgee to protect those. One of the reasons why we have these species hanging on is because the river is characteristically has steep gorge sections. As you can see, I've sort of drawn those orange lines along the river, and that's then interspersed that are typically steep and they're rocky and they have a lot of fall, and then they're interspersed with these low-lying areas that are typically flatter, more alluvial. They're the areas that have been historically modified because that's where you'll be able to do farming. And I've shown you some images of that on the left-hand side, and so you can see that in those gorge areas, they naturally retain those exact characteristics that are described of what is a healthy upland stream. And then the lower picture I thought was also instructive to include because it actually describes the type of threats that we are working on to reduce to be able to support the habitat and the health of the river, which then support the native fish species. Because as the native fish recovery strategy says, if you have healthy native fish populations, that's a sign of a healthy river. And in turn, a healthy river will support a native fish population. And a healthy river will support all the other values that Andy talked about. So it's really important. So here you can see in the lower areas, while we have got sort of more scouring flows in the steeper sections of the gorge, we've got a lot of sand build up. The vegetation has been cleared. A lot of those trees you see are actually willows. They don't drop any carbon into the river for most of the year, and then they just dump it all in at one time of the year, which sort of chokes the river up, provides sort of deep mud and reduces oxygen, and then that reduces the health. The sand also fills up the deep pools. So I just wanted to take a moment to actually talk a little bit about the work that we've been doing with all those partners that I've seen before and the investment that we have, and there's a lot of people in this room that are involved in that, to actually try to improve the health of the river from that environmental, ecological point of view. And a lot of our work is actually focused on reducing the threats to improve the health, and that will then support the fish. And this picture is also instructive. One thing I like about this picture is you can see just how quickly it can go from a gorge to the sort of low open areas. But this picture describes some of the work which might include multiple interventions at a site. We've reduced the willows so that the native vegetation can thrive. We've replanted the riparian vegetation to provide shading, the right nutrients onto the river, and also connect the river along its length. Another focus of work for the UMDR, the ACT government, is to try to improve better connectivity through the areas that are so affected with the sand. One example is at the Tharwa Sand Wash. When sand fills up a channel of a river, it just becomes wide and narrow and shallow. if you look at a sandy desert and think about how much good terrestrial habitat that provides, probably very minimal. It's a hot, inhospitable place. Sand in the river, ecologically for aquatic system, is just the same. It's a hot, inhospitable place. So this is a picture of the Tharwell log jams, which have been established in order to try to constrict the flow and re-establish that scouring that would have naturally happened. And these log jams are monitored by the ACT government. They're showing that they're expensive, but they are effective. They're providing scour holes, so deep holes where the fish can be. They're also providing wood and rock, which provides habitat in the stream. And so these are the type of interventions that are required. And all the threats, however, it doesn't matter how many log jams we put in, how many trees we plant, the one threat to our rivers which underlies or is connected to all of those other threats and underlies the success of those threats is having the appropriate flow regime. Now, I don't have to tell you that without water we're not going to have fish. And in the Upper Murrumbidgee, we are a regulated stream, and this is a picture of Tantangra Dam at the top of the stream. And here you can see this is an aerial picture of the Sarwa Wash. So, you know, once that water goes, the water goes underground and we can't access it. And from our work, we know that we do need to have a better balance of water management in the Upper Murrumbidgee. And this is why today is it's so pleasing to see this forum, because we can come together and we can start talking about what those better arrangements might need to be. Those will include things like better communications between all of the stakeholders. I'm in the ground just thinking about fish, but you know, how are other people using the river, and how can things that benefit fish benefit other water users? I pointed out, or Andy pointed out, that we've got ACT and New South Wales, 2 jurisdictions, and even though with the work that I do, I've found that we've got this amazing collaboration between all of the partners, the actual policy instruments that sit above them, they don't even speak to each other and they're not connected. And so I wanted to highlight the work that we do, but you know, also understand that unless we address at higher policy level, we're not going to be effective no matter how much funding and investment we can have. And another example of how we could do better with our flow management is that Tantangra Dam actually releases some environmental flows. But up to date, under the New South Wales Water Sharing Plan, those flows were legally available for use within the water source once they were released for the dam, which meant that even though they're meant for the environment, they could be extracted out of the river. We have been pleased to see that this year they've been trialling some temporary protections. There's a mechanism in the legislation for that could protect the flows. But we're hoping from our side of things with the fish and looking at river health with Water Watch that these can be made permanent. And so I just wanted to have a little talk about those environmental flows, just ecologically. When those environmental flows go down, they're going to be flowing into areas like this. This is a 9-metre deep refuge pool on the Upper Murrumbidgee. This refuge pool will be critical in times like 2019 for Murray cod, for platypus. Somebody looking at that pool might say, why do we need a flow down there? We've got all this body of water in there, what are you worried about? But putting flows down when you have refuge pool like that means that the oxygen in that pool will be circulated. So even though there might be water in the river, having that flow come through and available for these pools is really critical to sustain those communities. So you might see water, but ecologically we need the flow to drive that process. The other thing is we have flows that are released in order to mimic the snow melt that used to clean all the cobble habitat. And it's not a very scientific term, but we call it a rockin' and rolling flow. And what that flow will do is it'll rearrange all that cobble and clean the sediment out of it. And riffles like this, these are the spawning habitat for Macquarie perch. And this photo was taken above Cooma in the last year, and you can actually see that these rocks are not clean. So the flows that we are actually letting out of the dam are not enough to actually clean those riffles to allow the spawning to protect the Macquarie perch. So one of the things that we could have with our flow regime is if we had a bit more flexibility to piggyback onto a flow, we might actually achieve that outcome. And it's another example. You might say, well, there's already a lot of water in the river, and I agree, there's a lot of water in the river, but the test of how much water is needed is whether that habitat's clean or not. So just wanted to reiterate again, today is a really important step, and there's a diverse range of people, and we're sharing our views and all of our needs, and trying to address the kind of tensions with the flow management that we do have, or the different problems. And so I think that's a really great step for the fish, to improve the river for the fish and for our communities. And it's really great to see that we're working towards a healthy working river.